Here's how I create my thumbnails to get as many clicks as possible. Mr. Beast says, if they don't click, they don't watch. And I couldn't agree more. 50% of your video success depends on thumbnails and titles. Yet we still recall to create a thumbnail only like 5 minutes before we publish our video, right? What do? We go to a photo editor, maybe add some low quality photo of us. We snap our logo on there, copy and paste our title, of course, and bam, boom, pow, a crappy thumbnail is ready. Or even worse, we just choose the frame that YouTube created for us and hit publish. Don't do that. I know, like, thumbnails are really tricky, all jokes aside. But with several years working with that for me and for my clients, I've come up with several rules that I follow religiously and that improve my video's performance every single time. First of all, be a copycat. Yeah, nobody dares to tell it like that because it's rather unethical, but when you're starting out on YouTube and you still don't have that feeling of a good thumbnail, this is exactly what I would suggest. I would suggest copying what works for others. Find a competitor's most popular video and replicate the concept. I mean, really replicate. I'm gonna show you how I did it. For example, this video was completely stolen from this video. I mean, the thumbnail, of course, not the rest of it. And this thumbnail was stolen from this video and it got tens of thousands of views, and I believe mostly because of it. Look at the CTR. It's beautiful no matter what traffic source you choose. See? It's borderline stealing, and I want you to do exactly that if you are a complete beginner in that. Right after you finish writing your hateful comment about me being a fraud, next very important rule is to not use fancy fonts. Fonts should be bold and very simple. Choose this instead of this. It's just good manner to avoid fancy fonts because they're very difficult to read.
It's an older code, Skipper. I can't make it out.
They might look pretty on a website or a blog or on a card that you want to send to your granny on her birthday. But it's just really hard to grasp the concept of your video if you use these fonts. YouTube says that the majority of their watch time comes from mobile. And this is a very important statistics for us because you now understand that people actually decide whether or not to watch your video based on this little picture. And you need to make sure it's very easy for them to read everything that's written in there. Which brings me to the second point of this video. No matter what they tell you, size matters. You need to make it as big as possible so that people from the very large distance could see it. I'm talking about text, objects, emoji if you use them, photo, any other objects that you might use. Because if someone can't see what exactly is on your thumbnail, they will just scroll past. So what I like to do is when I created a thumbnail, it's usually in the folder somewhere, right? So I zoom out a little bit to understand if I can grasp the idea of my video from the thumbnail if it's in that small size, you know, like this. Here's a little comparison for you to understand what works and what doesn't. This is a bad example, this is a good example. And you probably ask me, how can you make everything large if you want to include so many objects on your thumbnail? It's the very good question. The answer is you shouldn't include many objects on your thumbnail. I try to keep it really minimal when it comes to the amount of objects that I use. I use up to 3 maximum components on my thumbnail. It doesn't mean that every single letter of the text is considered to be a component. The following example functions really well and performs really well. For example, if you have a text, it creates one single component, and then you have your photo. It creates another one single component. So basically you have 2 components, and most of the times it is actually enough for your thumbnail to be very functional. But sometimes you want to add something recognizable, like a logo of the app that you are using for your tutorial, let's say. So you add this big element and now you have 3 objects in your thumbnail, and this is enough. Stop there, because it will be way easier for people to read it, to understand what's going on, even if the picture is really small. Also, having many objects may be just confusing, so you look at it and you don't know what to focus on. Of course, it's also important to look at the hierarchy, but we're not gonna dive into it. Stick to 3 main components and you'll be good. Let's say you've chosen 3 main components for your thumbnails. They are still not gonna work for you if you don't follow the contrast rule. So you use dark things on light things and light things on dark things. That's like the rule of thumb. And what do I mean by light on dark? I mean really, really light on really, really dark. So if you use white letters on white background, but you have a stroke on that text, this does not count. This is still white on white. Choose contrast always. Light on dark, dark on light. This helps ensure that everything on your thumbnail is readable and catches the viewer's eye. You sometimes want to add glow or shadow to differentiate your object from the background. Also, I often darken the background to make it even more contrasting with everything that's in the front. Some say that it's better to not use any text on your thumbnail, but I believe it just depends on the text, right? But it's really important that your text doesn't have more than 3 words. Of course, there are always exceptions, but as a rule, I try to not add more than 3 words in my text, and ideally, they should be all divided from each other, so the divided words are easier to read. For example, look at this previous video of mine. I have this text really bold. I have another word that's smaller or a different font or a different size or all big letters or all small letters, and I have another word that's also completely different style, and this is how you make it easier to read. You use hierarchy: most important, less important, the least important, like headline, sub-headline, and the text. This also helps a lot to make your thumbnails more readable. The next rule that I use really often is to change your thumbnail if it doesn't work. I don't really get why we just post a video and forget about it. So what I do every time, I go to a CTR and check the CTR of videos by the traffic sources. If I see that it's really low, I change the thumbnail. But what metrics to follow? I usually try to get my browse features a CTR more than 5%. I mean, sometimes 4 is okay, but I really try to get to this 5% number at least. And as to suggested videos as a traffic source, I look at it and try to make it more than 0.5. Also depends. If you have like really high CTR in browse features but low CTR in suggested videos, I would still not change the thumbnail because like it performs well in one of the traffic sources, so it might just go take off on that traffic source. It depends, but like if your video does not perform or performs more poorly than your previous videos, why not just change it? There are plenty of examples of videos where I did that and performance of the video improved. For example, this video, I changed the thumbnail, it went up. This video, again, changed the thumbnail, views went up. And this video for my client, it worked the same way. Like we discussed it, we decided that we want a little bit higher CTR and we see the potential of this video. I changed the thumbnail, it took off well for that channel. Okay, there's way more that I can cover about thumbnail. If you made it this far, comment clicks and I will make another episode of this thumbnail educational video series. If you don't want to stop at thumbnails, but you want to understand the full workflow of running a YouTube channel, then I recommend my guide, How to Get from 0 to 1,000 subscribers spending only 2 hours a week. So here's the brutal truth about my experience on YouTube. It's gonna be right here. Click and watch. Gotcha.